Just be blessed.
My name is Teresa. Most people know me by Jonell, which is my middle name. And I was the baby of 4 girls. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents were farmers. My dad was a farmer. He also was a builder. And so I was the baby, and I was supposed to be a boy, so I was named after my dad. But life was good. I had good parents, and we were just a normal family, I guess, is the way to look at it. I was the afterthought, as my sisters like to say, the accident. But I don't believe God makes accidents. So there is a reason for all of us. And sometimes it takes us a while to figure what that is. But yeah, I was the baby of 4. No brothers, all girls. And since we lived on a farm, we got to be farmhands. So I'm a true farmer's daughter all the way through. And growing up in the country was great. Mom and Dad taught us good lessons, honesty, integrity, that your word meant something. When you gave your word, it meant something. Hard work, we had plenty of hard work. I got to grow up milking a cow and feeding baby calves and bucking bales. And although Dad had no sons, us girls, we worked nice and hard. So that's my background. Church every week, did not miss the Sabbath. Church was very important to our family. God was very important to our family. And I grew up learning about Jesus as a very young child. And I was baptized when I was 9. And I know a lot of people think that that's really young, but Jesus was very real to me, and it was very important. And I just believe that that helped shape my whole growing up in life, is learning about Jesus when I was young and committing my heart to Him. I was the baby of 4 girls. My parents were married very young, high school sweethearts, 18 and 19. So life was great. They were busy and active, and 3 kids. And then they were done until I showed up about 5 years later. My sisters like to tell me that I was an accident, but I don't believe I was an accident. But I was a very sick little baby. My mom shared many stories with me that I did not stop crying until I was 3 years old. And many people would just glare at her and give her dirty looks. And can't you make that baby be quiet? And Mom just loved me, and truly, truly loved me. And one time she told about, we lived about 45 miles from town, and it was the middle of the night, and I was just an infant, and very, very sick, very, very sick, very dehydrated. And she took me by herself in the middle of the night to the hospital. And the doctor looked at me and said, "She's fine," and sent me home. And my mom said she bawled the whole way home and prayed and prayed. And her dad gave her some advice, and she was able to get me alive, keep me alive. So even though I may have been an accident, God had a reason for me to be alive. I had beautiful, beautiful Christian parents. We lived in the country, out in the middle of nowhere. My dad was a builder and also a farmer. And since there were no brothers, we had a lot of work to do, us girls. And many stories of living out in the mountains. One other fun time that my sisters like to remind me about was we had a lot of dogs, and we raised alfalfa. So at night, we would go sleep out in the alfalfa field in the back of a Jeep, because the deer would like to come down and eat the alfalfa. But if the dogs were with us, the deer would stay away. So Dad's way to keep the crop from getting destroyed was to let the girls go sleep out in the hay, or out in the field. So this one night, we were all out there sleeping. I was probably about 3. My sisters heard what they thought was a mountain lion, and they couldn't get the old Jeep to start. So they hoofed it to the house, which was about 2 miles away. But they forgot to wake up their baby sister, who was left laying there sound asleep. And so when Mom counted noses and realized one was missing, yeah, she sent my oldest sister back to rescue me. So, like I said, God had a reason for me to stay alive, even despite my sisters or my illness. And yeah, God was good. And growing up with Christian parents was a blessing. When I was about 6, my family moved to the city, I guess is what we would call it. We went from the country and moved to town about 2 hours away. And I actually started church school then. And the neat thing about it was there was a lot of activities. We had Pathfinders and very active youth groups. So my grade school years were very much centered around our church and our youth activities. Family was still very important, but very busy. My sisters were off to high school or academy and kind of gone. So our family, our close-knit family, was a little broader because of all the activities. And then when I was about 16, my parents bought a farm again and moved back to the country, and that's when I went on to boarding academy, which was great, and loved those years. Those were really fun. But I wanted to try something different for college. So after trying a summer at one of our Christian colleges, I chose to go to a state college for my schooling, which was great because it gave me an opportunity to decide who I wanted to be. I had grown up in a Christian home and had learned the faith of my parents, but I needed to make it real for me. I needed to make it personal for me. And at a state college, I could have been anybody or anything, and they wouldn't have been the wiser. So that was where God helped become more real to me personally. I actually met my husband at church. When I was attending the college, I would usually go home on weekends, but occasionally I would stay. And his mother worked for the same doctor that I worked for through my college practicum. So it was pretty convenient to meet her son, and she thought it was phenomenal to try to set him up. So we were married in 1985, and his name was Kevin. And it was great. We were newlyweds and it was great. We had a lot of fun. However, I didn't realize that when I got married, I would clip my roots. So we averaged moving like every 6 months, which is really incredible since I'd only moved 2 times in my whole life. But it was all good. And we chose to start our family early because we wanted to still be young when our kids were in college and off on their own. And so we did. We had a little baby girl, Tiffany. And then 2.5 years later, we had Kimberly, and we were all set. One for him and one for me. And life was great. And about our 15th move later, I don't remember if it was exactly 15, but it was somewhere close, we ended up moving to Medford, which is where we currently are living. And the kids were in school, I was back to work, life was moving on. And then God blessed us with a surprise. And in 1996, our precious son was born. And that was a pretty tough year for us because about 2 weeks before we found out that Andrew was a boy, which is the only grandson on my husband's side, his dad passed away suddenly in his sleep. 61 years old, very tragic. So our family had a real hard time that summer. And it was hard for me to accept being pregnant again also because I really didn't want to go through that again. But anyway, like I said, God knows better than I do. And he had him planned. And then when Andrew was born, his birth was, well, let's just say it was difficult. In Medford is where our son was born, 1996. And I thought our family had been complete with 2 little girls. They were great, but God knew that we needed Andrew. He had been teaching me lessons all through our married life of difficulties and things that we had to overcome. I won't even begin to go into all those. But when Andrew came, it was because of the lessons that God had taught me in the past that I could be who I needed to be for Andrew. Because, well, let me back up. We played a little game, Andrew and I did. I would poke my tummy and he would kick me. And it was great. And Kevin would give me fits because he'd say, "You're trying to poke my little boy's eyes out." And I would just laugh. Well, on the morning that Andrew was born, I poked and he didn't respond. And so all day I was high alert that something was wrong. That night when Kevin took the girls to Pathfinders, I was very aware that there was no movement. And one of my dear friends called me and we chatted about it, and she's a nurse, and she said, "You need to go in and get checked." Well, she scared me a little bit, so when Kevin came home, I told him what Debbie had said, and he said, "Well, call the hospital." So I did. And they wanted me to take some sugar water, something that would stimulate the baby, and then count the kicks. So I drank some pear juice or something, and there was no movement. And I told Kevin, I have not felt movement all day. So long story short, we went into the hospital that night, and it's about 10:30 we got there and filled out the paperwork and took me back, and the nurse put the monitor on my stomach, felt the heartbeat, and then it stopped. And then she moved around and went back to the same spot. Heartbeat started again, then it stopped. And then she told Kevin, push the red button on the wall. And he said, what red button? And so she went and pushed the red button. And then she yelled out the door, we have a bad baby in here. Well, let me tell you, my heart wanted to stop, because I was thinking, my baby is anything but bad. We've got problems. Andrew was born at 11:07, and he, by emergency cesarean, he had no heartbeat, no glucose, and he had just stopped breathing. And the doctor told me that if we would have waited even an hour longer, they would not have been able to resuscitate him. He had been starving inside my room for 4 weeks, and I had no clue. And his brain was slowly shutting his body down. His body was, but it was shutting down all the movements to preserve his brain. And so, miracle of all miracles, our son Andrew was born. He does have cerebral palsy. He has motor impairment, but his brain is as intelligent and as smart as a whip, and he has been truly, truly a blessing to our family. God has taught me many, many miracles and object lessons, which is what my family likes to tease me with, that I look for object lessons in everything. And God has taught me many object lessons through Andrew. And my heart hurts for him when people see him and think, oh, you're doing such a good job, and they say things like that to me. And it hurts him, because then it makes him feel like a burden. And if there's anything about my testimony that I would like to share, is that Andrew is the biggest blessing. He is not a burden in any way, shape, or form. And I'd like to share one lesson that God helped me see through Andrew. Deuteronomy 31:6 is a verse that has been very, very important to our family. It says, be strong and of good courage. Do not fear or be afraid of them. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. That's an important verse to Andrew for many reasons. Number one, he doesn't like to be alone. And so this is a reassurance that he will never be alone. And it's also another one to realize that when we have fears and we have problems, God recognizes that, and we can surrender them to him, and he'll help us. Andrew is a blessing to our family, 100%. And I know a lot of people that don't know him can see him maybe as a handicap, as a problem, as a burden. But I cannot stress enough that our family would not be complete if it was not for Andrew. He has been one of the biggest blessings completely to me, to my daughters, to my husband. And so we are very pleased that he is a part of our family. And he has taught us so many lessons, so many lessons. The biggest one being that all of us are disabled in some way. None of us are designed or created the way God originally planned. We all have imperfections. Some may be visible, some may not. But it doesn't matter, because God loves us for who we are, not for what we do. That there's no way we can earn our salvation. There's no way that we can be good enough or work harder for him to love us more. I love all 3 of my children, and they just need me in a different way. Andrew needs me for life. He needs me for his hands and his feet to help him experience his world. My daughters need me as their friend and their mom, but more their friend now. We need God for life. We need him for our very breath that we breathe. We need him for our very existence. God has taught me that lesson through Andrew, and I am so eternally thankful. Heaven will be wonderful with Jesus and Andrew walking side by side. And I kind of think Jesus is going to have a hard time holding him back, because he's probably going to be running. But that's okay, because Jesus can run too. Heaven will be great. I just want to encourage anyone that may be watching this that If you're having hardships, if you're having problems, look for the good. Look for the blessings. Life is about taking one step at a time, not focusing on the problems, being filled with praise and positive. God did not make Andrew the way he is. We live in a sinful world. We live in a troubled world. God saved his life. God gave him life. And our gift from God is life. Our gift back to God is what we do with that life. A little routine we do at night now is I don't poke him anymore, so he doesn't kick me, which is kind of nice because he is 20. But we go through our thankfuls. What are we thankful? We look for the positive each day. We focus on the good. We focus on what is good. Fill your heart with goodness. Fill your heart with love. And do your best to be a blessing to someone around you.